Hello and welcome. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My profound thanks to all of you for joining, those who are joining us live today, and also those who will be watching this program later. We are back with yet another exciting talk to be delivered by one of the most eminent global authorities on marketing and advertising, the business leader based in New York. Today is Mr. Rishad Tobaccowala. He is here, and he, apart from the many laurels that he has, he is also an author of a very acclaimed, very widely received, appreciated book, which you can see on screen also, Restoring the Soul of Business. Here you can see Rishad Saab on the screen. So
Hello.
welcome to you, and hello. So let me just briefly introduce him. He's the author of Restoring the Soul of Business: Staying Human in the Age of Data. This book is published by HarperCollins. Rishad has been named by Business Week as one of the top business leaders for his pioneering innovation, and Time magazine has dubbed him one of the five marketing innovators. He's a senior advisor currently to the Publicis Group. It is the world's third largest communication firm with 80,000 employees. Uh, I'm sure Publicis Group exists in Pakistan, and it has many affiliates here as well, Rishad. So you have many colleagues working here as well. Um, so he was a global chief growth officer to Publicist and a chief strategist. He did his BS in mathematics from the University of Bombay, and he's also an MBA in marketing and finance from the Booth School of Business from the University of Chicago. So, before I request Mr. Rishad to give a crisp keynote on the topic, that is particularly his book, The Soul of Business, we have titled it. I also would like to inform you that after this talk, Mr. Rishad Tobaccowala will be joined by Mr. Adil Ahmed, the director of the Symmetry Group. And Adil needs no introduction in Pakistan. He is a digital marketing pioneer. He's still very young, but he started off at a very young age, and one of the few people who could rightly claim to have shaped the profession of digital marketing in Pakistan. And now he is very much involved in the fintech, in the app development, in the data, understanding the data, the insights from it, and particularly his conversation today with Mr. Rishad will be based around both the compilation of data and its interpretation, its use, the insights, and the most important element, which is the human element, which Mr. Rishad has so eloquently highlighted in his book and his talks. So um, now I would like to request Mr. Pagowala to please begin with your talk. And we have a very good audience, Mr. Rishad, and we have been supported by the Marketing Association of Pakistan, the Chartered Financial and the CFA Association of Pakistan, the Corporate Communications Association, the Software House Association, Pasha, um, plenty of other, the Marketing Association, and your very own Pakistan Advertising Association, and all that. Your friend Sarmad Ali Saab, I believe he is heading the international IAA chapter of Pakistan. He's also attending this talk, and so we have a distinguished audience, and the subject has been very well received by across the industry and the functions, and we look forward, and they all look forward to benefit from your talk and from the question answer that will follow. Folks, you can ask the questions during the talk as well. There will be on your screen appearing a link, a Google Doc link, and a Slido app, link which you can use. And those questions will be forwarded to the moderator, who already has a plenty of questions that have already been forwarded to us by you at the time of registrations. So, Rishad Saab, please begin. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you for the invitation to speak with all of you all. And obviously, thank you all for attending. I know it's in the evening on Friday for most of you all. And I always love talking to people from South Asia. I grew up in Bombay, in India. Uh, I had relatives in Karachi. However, I haven't, last time I was there was 30, 40 years ago. So I appreciate all of you all spending time today. I'm going to speak for the next 25 minutes about some key themes from my book, um, why I wrote it, and what some of the key takeaways are. And I will then obviously have a conversation and also open up questions. So, very, very quickly, give you 2 minutes of my background in addition to what you've heard. Um, I grew up in India, got a degree in mathematics, got an MBA in finance and marketing. So I do understand math and I do understand technology. And then spent nearly 4 decades working in marketing for clients all over the world. And it was very global. So while I am based in the United States, before COVID, I would take about 140 flights, not 140 trips, but 140 flights a year. And I'd, visit Asia probably 6 times a year, Europe maybe 6 times a year, and other places. So the perspective I'm going to share with you is a global perspective, a perspective that resonates wherever there are human beings, and I believe there are lots of human beings in South Asia, in India, and Pakistan. I think there's over 225 million in Pakistan, uh, and over a billion in India, and wherever else people are tuning in from. So one of the things I realized over the years was that as technology was spreading, as finance and data became more important, and I know there are many people here, both in marketing and in finance, among other places, that companies that were doing particularly well were not necessarily the companies that were only focusing on the data or only focusing on the financial metrics. Data and the financial metrics were very critical and continue to be essential, and you can't do any business without it. But the companies that really separated themselves from everybody were people who also, in addition to the math and the finance and the data, also paid a lot of attention to what I call the storytelling. So, in addition to the spreadsheet, they paid attention to the storytelling. And the storytelling isn't just telling stories and isn't just about ads, but it's about the culture of a company, the people in the company, the talent in the company. And when you combine those two, and companies that combined those two were companies that did the very best of all. So, yes, a company that focused, let's say, in the United States, primarily on finance. There is a bank called Wells Fargo that many of you are familiar with. It's the fourth or fifth largest banking company. And it did very well, but they were very driven to open new accounts. And so the whole business was we will promote people when they open new accounts. Well, when you do that, people start doing everything they can to open new accounts, including selling customers who don't need a new account, all the way to opening new accounts for dead people so that they could show that they opened new accounts. As a result of this, Wells Fargo has paid billions of dollars of fines. They're on their fourth or fifth CEO in approximately 5 years. So here is a company that was focused primarily on data. Similarly, in the airline business, the United Airlines was taken over by people who said, "We're going to run this as a financial company," and they started to cut costs, and they got into bad relationships with their staff, and United has gone bankrupt 2 times. So here's United and here's Wells Fargo. On the other hand, if you have companies that only think about story and imagery and they don't have the math and they don't have the other stuff under it, and they just have storytelling and advertising and marketing and nothing more than that, then you have something like WeWork, the famous WeWork company, that one day was worth, hundreds of billions of dollars or 60, $70 billion, and the next day was worth $15 billion, when people realized that there was no financial metrics that made any sense. Similarly, there was many airlines, National, Pan Am, TWA, that ran on story but did not actually have the financial metrics, and they didn't do well. So on one end, you've got storytelling businesses like Pan Am, or you've got spreadsheet businesses like United. But guess who does very well and is the airline that, until COVID, never lost money in the United States, loses less than 2.5% of its employees, and has had a soaring stock price? That airline is Southwest. And the only difference between Southwest and United, because they fly the same planes, they are under the same rules, they get the oil from the same places, is how they combined the financial discipline and the logistics of Southwest, the airline, with the talent, the storytelling of the people. So the people are friendlier, the airline works better. And so, company after company, you see that companies, or industry after industry, companies that combine the financial part and combine that with the people, culture, talent, storytelling part, are the ones that always do better on the three metrics that matter the most. Metric number one is customer satisfaction. Metric number two is employee retention. And not surprisingly, when you do those two, the metric that they do much better with than everybody else is financial returns. And that includes stock price evaluation. So when I saw that over the years, I was wondering why now, in this age of data and technology, because the nice thing with data and technology, they're global languages, but they're also languages that don't completely include the messy parts of running companies, which are people and other things. And so I said, why is it that we aren't focusing enough on that? And so I wrote a book, which is called Restoring the Soul of Business, Staying Human in the Age of Data, which actually combines, and the theme across the book is, how do you combine the spreadsheet and the story? And how do you combine the math and the meaning? And when you do that, you do particularly well. So in the book, I have 12 different chapters, and each chapter can be read separately. And even though the book was written before COVID, because it incorporates where the future of technology and business is going, there's a chapter on managing distributed work, or what we now call remote work. Because even before COVID, I thought more and more companies would spend a lot of time with some in the office and some with people spread out. There are chapters on how you have good meetings, whether they're real or virtual, and why you should actually schedule more meetings and not less meetings. There's a chapter on how you call truth out to power. And then there are chapters about where the future of the world is going. So I'm going to specifically mention four big things that I learned while writing the book, which are very relevant to everybody probably in this audience, because they have tended to be very relevant to all human beings. And that is the four questions that individuals ask, whether they're working in any industry or in their lives. And what are those four questions? So I'm going to ask those four questions, and I'm going to give you some answers to what those four questions are. And then at the end of this, I'll let you know where you can read more about them, in addition to the book, if you can or cannot get the book, but where you can read more about them for free in Pakistan. So the first question people ask is, what does the future look like? And the reason they ask that is because the world, we're all going to spend the rest of our lives in the future. So people want to know, what does the future look like? The second question people ask is, how do I manage change so it sucks less? And I'll explain to you why I believe change is actually difficult. But eventually we have to change, because if we don't change, we become irrelevant. But change is not that easy. The third question people ask is, how can I be a better leader? Even if you're just a person by yourself, how can you even better lead yourself? So how you can be a better leader? And the last question people ask is, how do I grow as a person? How do I grow my skill sets, and how do I keep growing? So those about future, about change, leadership, and growth are questions that people ask all over. So I'm going to give you early, small, short answers for each of them. And I'm going to link you to a place where you can read them and these answers in much more detail and share it with your organization or your friends and colleagues, and all of it is completely free. So the first um, question about the future is, there are four trends that are driving the future. One of them is globalization, and globalization is unstoppable. But as I explained to people in the West, it's a different flavor of globalization. It's no longer necessarily a globalization that is focused on and driven by Western Europe and the United States. It's a multipolar globalization where South Asia, China, Southeast Asia, Latin America, they all matter. And we have to sort of recognize that while there are 650 million people across Western Europe and North America, there are 6.3 billion people, which is almost 10 times as many outside. And so we have to think about globalization from a multipolar perspective, where China matters, South Asia matters, etc. And we're seeing that. The second, and all the big opportunities and threats facing the world, many of them are global. COVID-19, it's a global challenge. China and the implications, it's a global challenge. Um, the climate change, global challenge. So those are the things to sort of think about. The second is demographic shifts in the future. And demographic shifts is most of the world, with the exception of South Asia and Africa, the population is actually declining in most of the world, including China now. And in India, I just heard that peak population will occur in very quickly at 1.4 billion people earlier than before. But countries like Korea, Japan, a lot of um, Europe, population is declining, and it takes about 2.1 children per mother to keep population the same. In many of these countries, the replacement rate is now 1.2, 1.3, and that's going to have a massive implication. So I expect that eventually the Western countries, instead of building walls to keep out immigrants, will actually build boats to bring in immigrants, because they'll begin to realize, oh my God, we're losing population. Now, Africa is different. The population is increasing there, but most places population are decreasing. And then, with the exception of South Asia and Africa, again, where the population is young, most parts of the world, the population is old or growing older. In the US, where I am, 10,000 people turn 65 every day. So we have this demographic shifts of, population aging. We have demographic shifts of multi-ethnicity, especially in the Western world. So in the US, for instance, under 18, the country is already Caucasian minority or multi-ethnic for the whole country under 18. That obviously has given some challenges to the country. And then there's a big divide between the rural areas and the urban areas all over the world. And we have to pay attention to those three things: population and aging, rural urban divide, and multi ethnicity. Those are big implications. The third one really is COVID-19, which has changed the way the world is going to work forever. When you take all of us and put us into a financial, emotional, health, and other crisis for 2 years, everything from businesses to individuals, they rethink things in different ways. And the last one is technology. And technology, we are entering what I call the third connected age. So technology has been around since fire. Online's been around since, the internet's been around since the 1960s. But the World Wide Web came around in 1992, 1993, and that's when we entered the first connected age. And all of us began to go online to connect to shop or connect to discover. And we call that Google, and we call that Amazon, or we call that search, and we call that e-commerce. And those became very big businesses. They were satisfying human needs. In 2007, we entered the second connected age, which built on the first connected age. And that's probably the connected age that most changed the way the world worked in Pakistan, for instance, which is We entered the age where we started connecting all the time because of mobile phones, or we were connecting to each other because of social networks. And so those are things like Facebook and WhatsApp and Apple and Samsung, etc. And many companies were born and many new things happened. So in the world of finance, you have now huge valued companies like Square and others that could not exist if there wasn't mobile phones. Obviously, without mobile and recommendation, you wouldn't have things like Uber. Uh, and so entire new industries and businesses were built. Now we're entering the third connected age, which builds on the first two. And that is where data connects to data, which is AI. Increasingly in city areas, 5G will spread, and 5G is so much faster that the way we use mobile devices or mobile computing will change. We're going to see voice. I know in India, most people search now with voice rather than search with their fingers. You'll see augmented reality and soon virtual reality. Those are a little bit off, but they will be coming. And then there'll be quantum based computing. And as a result, that's going to change things. So the future is going to be driven by these four forces of globalization, demographic shifts, the impact of COVID-19, and technology. Now, in this world, we all recognize that when all these things are happening, there's lots of drama, lots of challenges. And so a lot of people are asking, how do we change? Now, when it comes to businesses, and it doesn't matter what businesses, all of you all who are on this are esteemed and very successful. So I'm going to let you know that you all are not going to be beaten by anybody. But if you get beaten in your business or beaten in your profession or beaten in your career, it will be because you decide to beat yourself, not because somebody beats you. And that's primarily because often successful people fail to change. They fail to understand that the world has changed. So General Motors and Ford and BMW kept thinking they were living in one world, but Tesla and Uber showed them that they were living in a different world. Today, the most valuable automobile companies are companies like Rivian and Tesla and Lucid. Similarly, some of the most important financial and banking companies are companies like Square and PayPal and Coinbase, and not the big banks, because the world changed. And this is the thing that we have to recognize. Change is very difficult. While people tell us change is good, it's really, really difficult because we have to learn new things, we have to make mistakes. And when you're already successful, why do you want to go through that pain? But while change sucks, irrelevance is even worse. And for all of you all to change in your companies, please recognize that as this new future comes around, your competitors and your opportunities are likely to come most likely from outside the category that you think you are operating in, because new technologies and new capabilities will suddenly make things come from nowhere. So the competition for newspapers and television and radio did not come from television, newspapers, and radio. It came from search and it came from social. So, therefore, pay attention to broad change, and you all, as companies and leaders and individuals, should recognize that there are 6 things you need to do in order for you to change. 3 of them, many successful businesses do, which is you come up with a new strategy, you might do a mergers and acquisition plan or change the way you invest. And third is you may reorganize your company. And all of those are important. But companies that just do those 3 or individuals that just do those 3 don't actually eventually succeed unless they do 4, 5, and 6. And 4 is, why is this change good for your employees? 5, how are you going to pay them differently to behave differently? And 6 is, what training are you going to basically be providing them? Because if you tell me to change, but you pay me to do things the old way and you still promote people the old way, you don't provide me with training, and it's good for the company, but it's not good for me, people in the company will not change, because in order to change, the people have to change. And you just can't say, I'm going to fire all the people and change everybody, because it's really hard. You may have to do some of it, but not all. So change management is very critical. The third area is leadership. I believe every individual is a leader, and leadership is different than being a boss. many bosses are leaders, but you don't have to be a boss to be a leader. And there are many bosses who are nothing but bosses, but not leaders. Over the years, I've discovered that there are six key things that leaders have. One is leaders are competent. You can't be great in finance and banking unless you know finance and banking, or advertising, or marketing unless you know something about it. So, competence. The second is you need to know how to manage time, but time in a different way, not to manage your time, but how do you allocate and invest in your company or make your allocations balancing today and tomorrow. If you don't deliver today, you won't arrive at tomorrow. But if you only focus on today, tomorrow will surprise you and you'll be out of business. A key part of leadership, including personal leadership, is how much do I do today and how much do I invest for tomorrow. The third one is trust. If you don't get people to trust you, it's very hard to be a leader. The fourth is empathy, which is if you can understand other people's perspectives. The fifth is very important, which is vulnerability. And that is the ability to accept that you might be wrong, be open for people to come and tell you, even though you're the big boss, that, hey, lady, or hey, man, you're wrong, and here's why. I have a chapter in my book which I call the turd on the table. And basically, um, often in meetings, we sit around the table and there's something brown and moist in the middle, and we think it's a brownie when it's a piece of shit, but we won't address it. And that's when trouble starts happening. And that happens when bosses say, we know all the answers, and they shout and yell at anybody who says, you might be wrong. Leadership is listening with a vulnerable perspective. And the last one is inspiration. Can you inspire people? Because people eventually follow people and they use their hearts as much as their minds. And those six, which is those competence, time management, trust, empathy, vulnerability, and inspiration, are big parts of leadership. I will end with how do you grow? One of the key things I've realized is all of us, when we work, whether at work, at our home, or in life, we basically look for certain things. We look for money, fame, and power. We'd like money, we'd like recognition, if not fame, and we'd like autonomy, if not power. But that's what most people want, and we want to make sure that we get that and we try to give that to our employees. But the reason employees and we stay at a place or we're happy is when we agree with the purpose, the values, and uh, we feel connected to other people in the organization. So, purpose, values, and connection. But the reason people really thrive in a career or in a life is when they have freedom and they have a story and they can grow. And growth is how do you become yourself? Success is eventually being able to spend time the way you want to. And a lot of that comes from both personal, financial, and other forms of growth. Now, it's very different for different people, different industries, but there are three commonalities that I've learned about growth, which I'll share with you. Number one is you have to spend an hour every day learning, or maybe 7 hours a week. But if you don't spend time learning, in a world that's changing really fast, you'll get left behind. And you can learn about new things, new technologies, whatever, but keep learning. The second is to build a case for the exact opposite of what you believe. One way of growing is recognizing that the opposite of what you think might be true. Especially today in a world where we surround ourselves in clusters of friends or with social media or all algorithms that optimize, we start to believe that our flatulence smells like Chanel 5, which it doesn't. So build a case for the exact opposite. So let's say you're making a recommendation. Maybe you're acquiring something, you're making an investment, you're trying to sell a client on a new program. Think of why the exact opposite of what your sales pitch might be is true. And if you do that, you'll actually strengthen your sales pitch and you'll also have a better idea of understanding what's actually going on. And the third is to do new things. In addition to learning, in addition to building cases, is to also do. So I will end with an example of something that I recently did, because I was trying to learn something new and understood, as part of my learning, I came across a technology called Substack. And Substack is a technology that allows people, anybody, any writer, doesn't have to be an author like myself, anyone, to combine a email marketing system, a content management system, and a billing system to go into newsletter publishing for themselves. And the entire technology is provided for 10% of what you charge. And if you charge nothing, it's $0 or zero, anything is what I pay. So I'm using technology invested in by Andreessen Horowitz to start writing a newsletter. I thought I wanted to learn what the technology was, and I ended up writing a newsletter 69 weeks ago every Sunday. Um, and I'm going to, in the chat, if you'll look at the chat, you will see the address of the newsletter, and you can go in and subscribe. It's completely free, and every Sunday you'll get something, and you'll also see all the previous 69 issues. And if you look at issue 48, 49, 51, or 49, 50, 51, and 52, so 49, 50, 51, and 52, in great detail, I've written about and provided stuff on these 4 questions that I gave you, the 4 questions of growth, of leadership, change, and future. But what's very interesting in learning about Substack, I began to write on different topics. I write about career management, the future of advertising, how media is going to change, what success is. I introduce new artists and new photographers. Uh, my most recent piece, I explain how Web 3.0 and NFT work and why, in English, and why creativity is important. Um, I've written about data. But interestingly, it's completely free. And when I tell people you can subscribe to it, I don't send it to people. If you like it, you subscribe to it. Right now, without any advertising, just word of mouth, my Sunday newsletter has approximately 12,000 subscribers. But because people share it with their organizations and in universities and other places, I have 50 to 100,000 readers a week. So I've become a media company by learning a new technology at 62 years old. So if you can't, and if I can do it, every one of you all can, which is spend time learning, build the opposite case, and do new things. Thank you for your time, and I will open it up for questions.
Fabulous talk. Thank you. Thanks a lot, Mr. Rishad Tobaccowala. It was inspirational and it was insightful. Uh, some key learnings for me, and I'm sure for many others. But let me now take Adil Ahmed on board, the co-founder of Symmetry, to engage you with a Q&A session. So, Adil, if you can join us.
Thank you, Hamza. Nice meeting you, Rishad.
Thank
Thank you for
you.
having me, Hamza. And very insightful session, as very rightly mentioned by Hamza. I think it would be very interesting to read the book now after the session. So before we've been receiving a lot
We
of
do have,
questions.
Adil, we have read a lot about the book
Yeah,
on by reviewing it online and also by watching a lot of presentations that Mr. Rishad has given. And I
true.
think with you on board, we will have some because he has presented a global scenario. So I
Sure.
think it will be very, very appropriate if we can localize it in our context also. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Hamza. So, Rishad, we've been receiving a lot of questions even prior to the session and even during the session as well. But before I start asking those questions, I'd love to hear your journey from your beginnings. As you mentioned, you're from Mumbai, Bombay in old days. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that and how you ended up with you know, one of the largest communication group in the world, second largest, the three big ones that I've been hearing in my past 20 years in the industry. So would love to hear your thoughts on that, and then we'll jump into the questions.
Sure. So, you know, I when I came out of the University of Chicago, like many people, whether it's from Pakistan or India, I did not have a green card. I did not have a working visa. I basically just had a 1 year training visa. And so almost no company would talk to me, but a advertising agency called Leo Burnett, only because the person who came to interview me, he had a friend, and his friend was from Pakistan and India. His name was Sadhu Patel, right? He had a combination. And he said, my friend is from that part of the world and he's pretty good. So I don't care if we can't invite you back, I'll invite you back. And we will figure out how to get you into the company, right? So part of it is I always remind people, so they always tell me, why do you spend so much time with people from Asia and helping them? Because I said, someone helped me. That's how that started. So I got my job, and I was lucky that I had good bosses. And over 12 years, I rose to be the account director on companies like Procter and Gamble. And then I began to learn new things like direct marketing, and then launched the first interactive shops in 1994 and 1995. In 2002, we got bought by the Publicis Group, and many of my brethren refused to accept that we now had bosses in Paris. We were a private company, so when you do a transaction and you take money, you also give up something for that money. You can't take money and say, I'm the boss still, right? So many of my colleagues basically said, we don't want to deal with the French. And I said, they just bought us. You have to deal with the French.
Right.
And we decided to sell them. There's money in your bank account. For that, you have to now listen to what they have to say. They own the company. So I adapted. So I didn't learn French. I didn't do anything else, but I adapted to the future. And over time, because of both my capabilities in digital, my capabilities in understanding that there's a global world that we're living in and not just a world that's in the US. Uh, and the French are very global in some ways, but also um, that I was willing to keep doing new things. I ended up getting on the board and ending up running strategy and growth for all 80,000 people, including helping in about $10 billion of acquisitions. So I know there are a lot of finance people here, so I work very closely with finance people, but I've also worked obviously on the future of advertising. So I've spent a lot of time on that and the future of marketing. So that's how it basically happened. And my, heritage from South Asia helped in two ways. The first way is when you are an immigrant, um, you look at things like an outsider. And in the world of marketing, seeing things in different ways helps you come up with ideas. But also in a world of change, when you look from outside, you're more likely to see vulnerabilities when the world changes, because you, even however much you're inside, you are outside at the same time. So that has basically helped a lot as, sort of an immigrant. The other thing that has helped, to a great extent, is often people underestimate immigrants. Now, it's not necessarily true in the world of technology, because in the world of technology, through something or the other, 6 of the 8 largest technology companies in the United States are run by Indians, first generation Indians, people who grew up in India, right? Microsoft, IBM, Adobe, Twitter, the list goes on, and Google, etc. But it also helped because people think sometimes that I have capabilities that I don't have. So they either underestimate you because you're an outsider, or they think you're a world-class engineer and doctor.
Right.
And those helped in an interesting way. So whenever people tell me, if you're South Asian, you're brown, how do you break into this big industry, which is primarily Caucasian, global? I said, because I pay attention. I don't think that much. I'm lucky people have helped me. But, we all come with assets and liabilities, and we can decide to focus on the liabilities and fail, or we can only focus on the assets and not try to figure out how to address the liabilities and go bankrupt. So we have to figure out that, and that's what I did.
Right. Okay. Again, a very inspirational story, and you mentioned adaptation. So you're still adapting. That's what you're doing, and that's pretty much everywhere on the internet. If I just searched once, and when Hamza mentioned, and you were there, you have a website, you have a social presence, you have a newsletter, and everything is there. So that is in itself. I mean, this is something that we keep on telling the brands to do, but you have made a brand out of
Yes.
yourself, and that's really, really kind of inspiration in itself.
So what I'm doing is, I'll give you an idea. All of these were started in the last year and a half, and I did these by myself because now I'm alone. I don't have a 80,000 person company. Now, obviously,
Right.
I work closely with them. I'm a senior advisor, and it's not like I'm sitting on the street, eating, tandoori chicken or something. But there's a thing. So I'm including also in the link a link to my website, but I'm specifically sending you to a page about the book. So people who want to know more about the book, including where you can get it all over the world. But you don't have to only look at that. You can navigate and you can look at other parts. So there are YouTube videos. And then a lot of my writing that goes on my Substack, I also put on my website. It's under blog. So you can see that. But as you see, whether it's Substack, social media presence, there's a company coming out of South Asia called Scroll Stack, Scroll Stack. So they came in and they said, why aren't you writing for us? So now I also write on Scroll Stack in addition to Substack to support people from South Asia, right? So
Right.
that's the other thing that's why you see me all over the place, because I did not forget where I came from. Because all of us, anybody who's successful, like all of you all are very successful, you need to know how to combine roots and wings, right? Without roots, you forget where you came from. But if you only stick to your roots, sometimes you don't change fast enough.
Right. Okay, cool. So with this, I move to a little deeper into the topic. So my first question to you would be that you've mentioned a lot about purpose, culture, people, values, and you kind of touch base on the customer side and the consumer side of this as well. But a lot of companies nowadays think that the strategies should be developed while putting the customer and the consumer at the heart of everything that we do. So where in all of this the customer and consumer lies?
So here's what begins to happen is there are three levels that a company has to take care of. And obviously today consumers and customers are very important. But I tell people that what they need to think about, instead of thinking of those people as consumers and customers, think about them as people. And why do I say that? Because if you look at people only as consumers and customers, you begin to understand them only through the lens of your product, your service. Uh, so you look at me, if you're a bank, as someone who does work with a bank. So you may not understand my full life. Like, I have children who I'm trying to educate and a lot of other things. And if you don't understand my full life, you may not be the best banking capability or best bank service. So P&G, which is a very big brand working all over the world, they don't focus on consumers as much as they focus on people. Because if they only focused on consumers, even though P&G's got all these different products, all P&G's products do the same thing. They remove dirt. They remove dirt from your clothes, from your teeth, from your behind. They're a dirt removal company. If they looked at me only through my dirt removal habits, I don't define myself through my dirt removal habits. They would not understand me as a person. Therefore, they would not understand what new products and services to come up with or how to talk to me. So I always say, yes, customer, consumer is a good word, but think of the word people. But interestingly, in the world of marketing, not only should you think of people, but in addition to people, in order to keep your people who shop from you, buy from you, bank with you happy, more important than keeping them happy is keeping your employees happy. My belief
Right.
is if you keep your employees trained, your employees happy, your employees growing, that's how your customer, consumer, and outside people will be happy. The difference
Right.
in that Southwest airline example was talent. I'm sure all across Pakistan, you can tell the difference between, eventually when there's a service you like and a service you don't like, it's because of the people. And we forget that it's which people, it's the people who work in the company. They're the ones coming up with the ideas, they're the ones providing the service. So for me, the focus is people first, inside the employees first, then consumers and customers as people, and then the financial metrics of the company.
Okay. So another question, which is pretty much related to this. So, and this is something that we've been now witnessing when we're dealing with the clients, we're visiting them for meetings. We meet the newer talent that has just joined the companies in the past 2 years during the time of COVID and pandemic, where people have been working from home, and also they. So the challenge that we feel a lot in these companies, these are like big companies. Some of them are FMCGs as well, and multinational companies. So at the time of pandemic, what has happened that the culture part and the values part, somehow there's a huge gap because you're not getting to meet your seniors personally. The human element is the physical touch is not there, the physical presence is not there, people are not networking physically. So, what are your thoughts on that? Like, how can companies overcome this challenge at the time of COVID or the time of pandemic, where they'll still ensure that those values, that culture is still inculcated, that those values are passed on to the new talent that is coming into the companies.
So it is difficult, but there are three things I would suggest. And obviously, different markets have different COVID constraints and requirements. But the first is recognizing that the way your company deals with COVID is a clear sign of what its cultures and values are. So, for instance, let's say you are a company that says we have very high cultures and values and we like loyalty. But the moment we got into trouble because of COVID, we kicked out everybody from their jobs, we cut all costs, and we stopped talking to people. Then you've already shown me what your culture and values and purposes are. So it's no use telling me about culture, purpose, and values having to do with getting to people in the offices. You just already showed it to me. What people make a mistake of thinking is that culture happens when you try to manage it. Culture happens when no one is looking. And culture doesn't necessarily have to happen in an office. Okay. So that goes to my second place. I think the future of work, and I've written a lot about it and in rishad.substack.com, and this is read by leaders all over the world. I have 500 CEOs who read me every week. Is I've written about what does the future of work look like, and then I've written something called the jigsaw of return, and then I've written something called escape velocity. Why are people leaving? Now this is in the West. We have this great resignation. And the reason is people think that it's going to be about home and office, but the future is about four places, not two places. And it's the third and fourth place where you will get back the things that we lost by not having people together in an office. So there's going to be the home. The office I call the museum. That's where you're going to have the pictures of the founders, all the old, stuff. People will come for training. But the third and fourth place are restaurants. Third places like WeWork, events and experiences. Because in many companies, when you network, when you get to know people, right, when you collaborate, you don't do it inside the office. You do it in a restaurant. You do it at an event. Those are all coming back. So even in a world, let's say that there is no COVID, I don't think people will go back to the office 5 days a week ever, unless you're a dentist. Because at least in most parts of the world, I want where I can get the best talent. And there are companies like a company called Automatic, which has been working, it's 2,000 people who have been working distributed. I don't call it hybrid remote, I call it distributed work. Um, and they've been working for 8 years, making numbers every year. The way they do it is 1 week every 13 weeks, so 1 week every 3 months. All the employees get together in a particular city in the world and they bond, they learn, they train, and then they go and operate from home. But they're given a budget if they need to take friends out and clients out, etc. But they don't have a physical office. The physical office is when they all get together 1 week every 13 weeks anywhere. So doing all of that, putting all your employees, taking them to different parts of the world, right, for a month, giving them money to maybe get some WeWork offices and restaurants, etc. They save money relative to real estate costs significantly and have able to attract any employee anywhere in the world.
Right.
That's the future of work. It's not going, especially all of us who are senior management, think of ourselves as zookeepers. The animals have escaped. The only people who want the animals to come back are the zookeepers.
Right. Okay. Now, so another question that participant has asked is that how much is the Western management practices are applicable in our kind of emerging market, for example, Pakistan or in the region?
So, what I will tell you is everything I write and every single part of my book works globally. Okay. And the reason is because my practices are not based on two things that are local. The three things that are local is the development of a particular market, both from income and technology and infrastructure. Those are different in different parts of the world. The second is markets are different based on culture, right? And third is markets. So there's an income infrastructure thing, there's a culture thing, and then third is markets tend to basically also be sort of different uh, because of just mindsets sometimes. What I've discovered is these four questions about what does the future look like, how do I manage change, how do I better be a leader, and how do I grow, are actually what management is about. We think management is about strategy and finance and technology. No, that happens to be an ingredient. That's not management. And management is about how you attract, retain, and grow people in a way that creates value for them and for your customers. That is dealing with people. And let me assure you, there is very little difference between what a Pakistani wants and an Australian wants. Very little from a human perspective. It might be very different on what they want to eat and things like that, but very, very similar. So the excuse and here's what basically happens is, let's suppose China decided, right, that, we're a backward country. There's not much we can do. It's 1992. Well, on paper, they're about to be the world's largest economy in 32 years. And by the way, they're right next to Pakistan and India. It had nothing to do. That's an excuse. It's an excuse of political and other leadership. If you can't build and grow people, get out of the way. There's a new wave coming.
Okay, so so you talked about the talent. You talked about top six companies being head by Indians.
Yeah.
So, what, in your opinion, are those six leaders doing differently right now, and what have they done differently to reach that point?
So if you look at the successful, these are six successful Indians, but it would be true Chinese, South Asian, any immigrants, anybody else. In fact, human. But these have done particularly successful. Number one is they're very highly educated. So they invested in education, right? So they came here usually for PhDs, master's degrees, etc. So that's number one. So that's the reason I talk about spending an hour learning. You can get formal education or you can educate yourself, but they are constantly learning. That's number one. The second is they are willing to look at things with a different mindset. So if you look at Satya Nadella, who took over Microsoft, for 10 years, he was in Microsoft for 29 years, but for 10 years it was run by Steve Ballmer, and the stock price went nowhere, and the company was just Microsoft. When he came over, one of the big things he talked about was how to think differently. And he said, what if we're wrong? So remember the second point I made, which is build a case for the exact opposite. So he said, we are focusing on Windows, but maybe Windows is not the future. The cloud is the future, right? We are getting people to compete with each other. The way they evaluated people was they used something called stack ranking. So the bottom 10% gets fired every year. So we're now living in a connected and collaborative world. We got to have our people working together. So I have to change my incentive systems. So he got rid of stack ranking. He gave everybody a book called Mindset. And he said, we now have to go from a know it all mindset to a learn it all mindset, right? And he got rid of the Windows division. There is no Windows division at Microsoft. The stock price went up fivefold in 7 years. So he thought differently. He thought in from the company. And that's the immigrant perspective also. Let me look from outside, not let me look from inside. Let me look from outside. And the third thing is they're really, really, really good at dealing with people. They have amazing people skills. Amazing people skills. If you talk to Satya Nadella, if you talk to um, the new gentleman from at Twitter, and I've seen him on video, amazing people skills. And so what you have is three things that make them: education and continuous training, the ability to see outside their business and challenge perspectives, and very good with people.
Right. Okay. So another question that I've received is that when we talk about all these four things, people, culture, talent, the values and the purpose, then who do you think is the department that should lead it? Whether it should be HR or it's job of one person, it's just the job of the CEO. Who should be leading all this effort?
So to me, you cannot be a leader of a company if you don't focus on the following three. And that means the CEO and the CFO and the COO, as well as the head of HR, has to focus on the following three things. Number one is attraction and retention of talent. The best CEOs spend 20 to 30% of their time attracting and retaining talent, because the best CEOs know that it's not them, but the team around them. It's not just them, it's the team around them. That's number one. Number two is the best CEOs spend time on strategy. Where is the company going? Where should it go? How's it going? And third is the best CEOs spend time on critical client issues. They may go, talk to their biggest clients or other kind of issues. So I believe, and the CFOs do the same thing. So those three, which is talent attraction and retention, what's the future strategy of my business, and speaking with clients. When you do that, what you will find is the following. Every leader needs to be involved and is an HR leader. But at the very same stage, HR leaders should be seen as in two different ways. HR leaders should be seen as people who make sure that HR works, rules are followed, people get hired, evaluations are done. But that's what I call the spreadsheet part of HR, very important. But then there is what I call the story part of HR. How do I attract and motivate people? What new types of people do I want? What new kinds of incentive systems should I create? How do I give people more freedom and growth? Right? That is the different part of HR. So both those parts have to be done. And HR itself does all the rules. The other part is done both by HR, but also by all the leaders.
Okay, great. Now, another question here is that, every company that I meet today is talking about digital transformation, is talking about data, is talking about tech, right? In most of the cases. And they're taking initiatives towards that as well. So when that the talk is always about this, and most of the time is about this, then how do you think it's humanly possible to detach themselves from a data led thinking and start thinking about the four things that you're talking about and the
So,
storytelling part that you mentioned?
yeah, so what I would basically say there, and I'll give you a 1 minute answer, and then I'm going to give you a 10-minute answer without speaking for 10 minutes. Okay. Um, so the 1 minute answer is about the 10-minute answer. If you look in chat, I've written a piece called It Takes Two to Transform. You just mentioned transform, right? So I talked about two to transform: technology and talent.
Right.
And then it explains in great detail this piece why, and it gives you case study after case study of why you need both. and why when people do one, they've never been successful. So this is the kind of writing. So if you go to rishad.substack.com, not only you have 69 of these pieces, and it's being now used in business schools and other places, not this one, but there are lots of others. Because what I've done is I've taken 40 years of research, current learning. I deal with CEOs and people all over the world, and it's very easy now because of Zoom. And I've distilled all the thinking into 6-7 minute reads of what people need to do. So that's the answer. That's a 10-minute answer. And that is because everyone has been asking the question, and I said, okay, let me give you an answer. The answer is not mine because I'm not smart enough to give my answer myself. I've looked around for answers and I've put them together.
Okay, great. Um, Talking again about the spreadsheet side of things. So at a crunch time, I mean, and I've seen this happening with the biggest companies in Pakistan, that quarter ending, we have to publish a quarterly report and we're short on our targets and all of that. And at that time, I mean, these are the times when you see people actually living their values, actually abiding by their culture and all of that. But that seems to take a backstage, and the entire focus shifts to the numbers, so to
Yeah.
speak.
So here's the thing. When we in leadership do that, we do it for three reasons. One is you have to run a business, and if you can't make your numbers, you may not have a business. So you have to make that decision. But you want to tell people that you're making the decision because of that in order to keep the business going. But when you do that, in most cases, you need to say something else, that you made the mistake. Because you're running the business. How come you run a business where at the end of every quarter you got to get rid of people? Did you plan wrong? Couldn't you keep your clients? Right? What people, eliminating people, if you explain, first you do it in a way that ideally you can give them enough severance. But if you can't do that, you explain why, and you have to take some of the blame. It's not their problem. You failed, right? And this is why people get opposed. It's not just people losing jobs. It's like, it's not my problem. Well, you were the CEO, you were the CFO. How come you can't make your quarter numbers all the time and have to lay off people? It's their problem or your problem? We always blame everybody else. Client, new situation, new something. Well, as a leader, you're supposed to anticipate problems. How come you run a company without anticipating any problems? That's the big issue. So my whole stuff is not that you don't lay off people. You have to. We've done that. I've done that often. But you have to explain why and when. Because here's what happens is when the market comes back and you want to try attracting people, good luck.
Mhm.
Because the story is spreading exactly how you operate. It's the reason why you now have in the United States the great resignation. People can't get people to work. They laid off people. They had all these purpose and values. They laid off people. Now they need people. The economy is growing, and people said, no, thank you. We've seen what you are. Purpose and values is not what you put on a t-shirt. Purpose and values is what you live. And you often have to make very hard decisions. I've had to make decisions, downsizing, etc. How you do it, how you say it, and taking some of the blame yourself makes a big difference. But otherwise, if it's everybody else's fault when things go wrong, and it's all your success when things go right, no one will follow you in the long run. Because I don't know the equivalent in Pakistan, but I'm sure it exists. In the US, there are things called glass door, etc., where people are exchanging behind the scenes everything you say in a meeting with other employees, how you've behaved
Okay.
and what you've done.
I
But they
think
have
it's a
all the
global
power,
phenomenon.
they have
Yeah.
all the data. You think you sit in your room with the power and data, that's over.
Yeah.
In today's world, that's over.
Okay, coming back to your book, so you wrote it before COVID, right? And in the now with 2 years into the pandemic, so what difference do you see? Do you think it's still very relevant, or do you think you're going to come back with another book for post-COVID era and all of that?
So I many people when they've read the book, and if you'll have a chance to read it, you all will actually think that I wrote it day before yesterday. Okay. So most people think have basically said, "Did you actually know that COVID was happening?" I said, "Don't be ridiculous, right?" I had no clue. And the last time that I touched my book was September of 2020, which is even before November when it first appeared in Wuhan. The reason my book resonated was primarily because I understood where demographic changes, globalization, and technology was taking things. What COVID did is it accelerated all of those things. So the book remains true. The one thing that the book does not have, and if I were going to add a chapter, is what is the implications of COVID specifically on people, society, etc. So the good news is I'm going to give you the chapter because I wrote it. And I wrote it 2 years ago. I wrote it in April of 2020. So if you look at um, your chat, you'll see a piece, and it's 2 years old. I just reprinted it on Substack. I wrote it out before I had Substack, right? And it will basically tell you all over the world. It's got a little bit of a US centric, but almost everything else is global as to what people are doing. I'm talking about the different phases. So that's the only chapter, if I were to add, I would have added. But I've added and I've given it to all of you free. And that's the other thing, which is I don't know if the future of publishing is books, because now I publish in different ways.
Right. Right. So this is really interesting that we can now at least have an insight on the next chapter in the book. So another question that I have is that you published um, the global trends almost a decade ago, and I think
Yes.
you've recently published the trends, and you mentioned some of them during your talk. So, what is the can you give us a difference between, like, did those predictions come true, and what are you like? What's the difference in terms of those trends and now whatever you are predicting for the next 10, 20 years?
Okay. So what happens, and I'm gonna see, this is the thing that most people don't realize is how, we're talking about global, and this is what I'm trying to get people to realize in their markets. What all of the people listening to this and you and I are doing would have been impossible to do 10 years ago,
True. Yeah.
right? And so when my whole stuff is the world is changing, and it's actually changing for the better so much faster, but people don't realize it. They keep thinking they're living in a different world. So you asked me a question, and in addition to you asking me the question, I'm going to give you the answer, but I'm going to paste the answer. I'm going to tell people how to look at it. So I've just pasted the answer, which is 10 forecasts for the next decade. And if you read that in the very beginning, it has a link. And I'll just, in case people don't see the link, I'll also share the piece I wrote 10 years ago uh, in the Economic Times of India when they asked me, what is going to happen in the next 10 years? And I wrote, here's what's going to happen in the next 10 years. And it was in 2010 is when I wrote it. I then re-looked at it, and here's how I did. I got 10 out of 10 right.
Oh,
Okay,
really?
I got all 10 right, including stuff that people had no idea was going to happen, like climate change, purpose-driven marketing, right? All 10. So therefore, I've now written the next 10, including what are some of the driving forces, which I talked to you about the next 10. So if you read these two, these actually, I'm now doing stuff at University of Chicago, Northwestern, many schools all over the world, because they said, like, people write books. You have to read 500 pages of gibberish, right? Read 1,500 words, and you'll have everything you need, uh, to move forward. Because this is the other keep of stuff. All of this is free. I don't have to sell anything, and as a result, I don't have to make pages and pages and pages and pages. And one of the things you'll see in one of the pieces, which I won't put in here, is I have a piece on how to write presentations and why you may not want to write presentations. We write lots of decks, especially in advertising and marketing. I'll show, there's a thing called rethinking presentations, where I said, if you have a presentation that's more than 9 slides, you don't have a presentation. You don't have an idea, right? You're just putting pages together.
Yeah.
which is pretty interesting. So you'll see how that works.
I think coming from the advertising background, you know how difficult that is to
Yes,
shorten the
what
presentations
I
for the
what I
audience.
did is
Yeah.
I built an entire career on doing decks, right?
Yeah.
Either no decks or less than 9 pages. And I've taught lots of people who are now leaders how to do that, and that's
Sure.
how to write presentations. And if you notice, we've had this conversation. I've not pulled out a single slide
True.
or video,
Yeah. True.
right, or anything, because what you that's because in the back of my mind I've written a presentation, but I don't have to show it to you. I can talk it to you. Now, in some cases where there's a particular slide, I'll pull out a slide, which I don't have here, but it's there. For those who are, because I know that there's a group of people from all different kinds of industries, but there's a group of people, clearly from the world of advertising and marketing. Um, and what I want to share with you all is if I was, besides, I'm sharing the most important things that work all around the world. This one is I, it works somewhat or in South Asia, but I'm not sure it works completely, but it works quite a bit. But if you want to know where the future of marketing is going, and this is clearly the future of marketing in Western countries, but parts of it is probably true in South Asia. Some of it I've seen in India. I don't know the exact, Pakistan market. Um, so there is this thing called the future of marketing. It's called Dawn of a New Era. I've just put that in. And that's where I actually use a slide. And I try to explain the future of marketing in one slide,
All right.
right?
Cool.
And 1,500 words and one slide. And that is being read by CMOs all over the world. And my whole thing is if you know something, you can distill it down. Hemingway supposedly wrote a line which said, if I had more time, I would have sent you a shorter letter, right?
Right.
My whole thing is I make it precise. I don't want to waste people's time. And that's why this is now read by 50 to 100,000 people, and it's free and it's all opt-in, because my whole stuff is here. It's free. It's 6-7 minutes every Sunday. Here's all the other 69 you can use. Do what you want, free. No
Excellent.
ad, no affiliate marketing, free.
So, last two questions.
Yep.
First one out of the two is that you've hired so many mid-level, senior level people in your life who came in with a lot of experience from some other companies, spending so much time and effort in those companies, learning their values and their culture. And then, don't you think what kind of a challenge that you faced when they joined your companies as part of the group? And then how difficult was it to transform them to actually live your values and understanding your culture and go by it?
So the two parts of it, there are two parts of it. One is when we hire people, I look for certain things. So it's a little bit more difficult when I inherit people versus hiring people. But we
Yeah.
often inherit people because either we get promoted or we buy a company or something of the sort.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when I hire for 6 C's. There are 6 C's. So the C's are, and it's in this talent and transformation is about people, right? So I hire for things like curiosity. I hire for collaboration. So I don't hire for expertise. I hire for behaviors.
Right.
Okay. And when you have behaviors, those people can adapt more. For other people, it's first to listen and try to figure out what their values are, because their values and their things might be as important as what you think. So I always listen to everybody and say, why do you want to do it this way when we're doing it that way? Sometimes I might be wrong. But even if you want to convert them into a different way, if you don't listen to them and think, then and just simply say you're wrong because you're new, you're an outsider, or we bought you, then they reject you. So it's listening to people.
All right.
So hopefully
Last,
this helps, and I know we're sort of out of time, but go ahead.
no, just one last,
Sure.
and I can see a lot of young people joining this, a lot of people who are aspiring to launch their own businesses, who are right now joined their first jobs, and also they're asking that what kind of activities they should indulge in terms of their personal growth, and how do they make most of their time throughout the day
Sure.
for their growth and to reach that leadership level.
Perfect. So here's what I'm going to do for you all. And I'm sure you all know how to click on a link, and if you just click on any one of these links, you get to where you'll see everything else. But what I want to basically give you all right now is something that is the most popular thing I have ever written. And I wrote it actually for everybody. It's not just young people, but this is also what I encourage young people to start with. And at the end of 40 years of working, I wrote something called 12 Career Lessons. Uh, and with the 12 career lessons, it gives you a link to all the things you need to do in the early career. Uh, and for those of you all who are starting your career, the thing that I would basically suggest is when you go to my Substack, read a thing called The Future of Work. And I've written recently also about how to get ready for the future of work, because you all are going to work for 30 to 50 years or 40 to 50 years, and the world's going to be different. And I put down some of the skill sets you need to learn. So hopefully that will be helpful.
All right. Thank you so much, Rishad. It's been an honor to moderate this
It's
session.
a
I
privilege to
firstly
be,
learned so.
it's a privilege to you all it's an honor for me to present to you all. And as you
Thank
know,
you.
I love that part of the world because that's where I came from.
Brilliant.
All right. So with this, my profound thanks to Rishad Tobaccowala for your valuable time. So we look forward to have more such sessions with you in future. Perhaps something for the marketing professionals.
Absolutely.
And that will be a privilege. And Adil, thank you for asking insightful questions and making this
Welcome.
conversation
Yeah.
Yes,
more.
I will. Thank you very
Thank you for
much. And I've
having me.
again put rishad.substack.com for people who want to have all of this and much more. Just go
Right.
put in your email and you'll
So
get it.
So we will
All right.
be promoting the link to your book in the subsequent emails and the social media pages that we are using, and we will be posting the stock because many who have registered might be viewing it later on, and
Yes.
also uh, I have subscribed to your Substack and started receiving the insights. So more and more people should benefit from it. I will be promoting that wonderful because you are providing this lifelong learning and lessons, and you are keeping learning and you are reinventing yourself. That's a great part. In last 1 year, you have developed yourself so much in the
Yes.
utilizing the new technologies. So fascinating discussion today. With this, folks, all the viewers, I thank you for your time, and we look forward to have Rishad Saab again sometime later, and other speakers as well. Thank you, Adil. Thank you, Rishad
Thank
Tobaccowala.
you. Thank you,
Thank you.
Shasha.
Bye
Thank you,
bye.
Hamza. Thank you, everyone. Allah
Bye.
Hafiz.
Allah Hafiz.